Cheryl, thank you for joining us today. For our audience, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a bit more detail what you do and how your day's been?
Yeah, no, my day's been fabulous. There's a real buzz around Expo today, which is really nice. I'm fresh off my workshop. I've just done a wellbeing workshop on the 4 pillars of emotional wellbeing for our neurodivergent children. So that kind of gives you a bit of a clue maybe as to what I do. So yeah, my name is Cheryl Warren and I have been in the childcare and education sector for about 30 years. I head up Aperion training and I'm working with predominantly nurseries and schools up and down the UK in understanding and delivering true neuro-inclusive practice. So I advocate and promote neurodiversity affirming practice, understanding that our children are different, but different is okay. Different is not a deficit, different is not a problem. Different is not something to be cured or fixed. We need to understand, support, accept and enable our children to thrive in our early year spaces. So I deliver training courses, I am a consultant, so I'm in the nurseries, in the schools itself, really supporting educators to understand what that neuro-inclusive practice looks like in terms of joining children in play, in terms of understanding their behaviour, in terms of the interventions that we might be doing for our children and whether or not they are neurodiversity affirming. We look at policy and then I support the team to really embed this practice because our children need this from us. Our children are given a bit of a raw deal sometimes. Our children are not always supported to the best that they could be so that they can thrive. The sector is tricky at the minute. We've got, funding and staffing and all sorts of things going on, and I know it's hard. SEND is right up there at the top of the agenda. Yeah. But with a few changes, a bit more understanding and training and support, we can turn it around for those children and for the teams looking after those children. So yeah, that's what I do. I have a podcast. I've just got a book hopefully coming out early next year, and I'm starting to go abroad as well. So spreading the word. Spreading the word.
I don't know when you find the time.
Yeah, I'm also mum to 2 neurodivergent boys myself. So yeah, it's all good fun in our house.
It's incredible. I'm going to dive into a number of the areas you've just sort of talked about there with such a wide breadth, and I genuinely mean I don't know where you find the time. One of the things I find quite comforting is that the sort of neuro inclusion and SEND inclusion has been progressively getting stronger in terms of agenda. It's actually brought forward a lot of people to really express themselves in terms of we are not quite as confident that we are inclusive, and what can we do, and actually as a sector, how do we solve this problem? So I think for me, I think that's just really, really comforting. So you mentioned, and I hope you don't mind, obviously you're talking about also as a mother too. So as a professional and a parent of neurodivergent children, how have your personal experiences shaped your approach to training others in the earlier sectors?
Massively is really the word that I would use. I do what I do because this is my lived experience. Yeah. And I have had to fight for my children. I've had to advocate for my children. I've had to speak up for my children to be heard, for my children to be understood, for their needs to be met, for support to be put in place for them in educational environments. But I'm that parent. I never was. I was always the follower at school. I was never a leader. I was never one to have, put my opinions across in front of other people. I would kind of hide in the background. But my children have brought out this kind of inner lioness almost inside me, because I have to speak up for my children. I have to advocate for my children. I have to tell the world and well, certainly those caring for my children, that they need this from you. I need you to understand where my children are at and where they're coming from. I need you to be able to provide a place for my children to thrive here. Do not lower the expectations on my children. Presume competence. My children can. They just need a bit of support to be able to do it. And I kind of feel, I was speaking a couple of years ago at Nursery World show, and I kind of said at the beginning that, you know, I've got this platform to speak, and I kind of feel like I'm speaking for other parents too, who maybe don't get this platform. And actually I've connected with so many of them who are saying, keep shouting, because you're the voice that's kind of getting into the schools, getting into the settings to say, we need to look at this differently. We need to readdress this. We need to understand, to view our children differently. Our children are different, but different is not a deficit. Difference is not a problem. Difference is not something to be cured or fixed. My children are not broken. There's an amazing book by Heidi Maver called Your Child is Not Broken, and my children are not broken. My children view life, my children are living life differently, but different is okay. So they are the reason I mean, they literally physically and metaphorically get me out of bed in the morning to keep spreading the message, because, you know, my children are now 16 and 9. They're out of early years, way out of early years. Quite frankly, I don't really know what I'm doing with them anymore. But if I can make a difference to a child and a family now, because the educator sees them with that neuro-affirming lens, I can sleep well at night. So,
you mentioned you're starting to work internationally, or you're working more internationally as well. So, what are some of the key cultural differences that you've observed, and how do you adapt your approach while staying true to your message of empathy and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think certainly what I've found in the countries that I've been to and have been spoken about before I head out to them, I'm heading out to one at the end of October, is that as much as in the UK we feel that there's still so much more we can do, there are countries out there that are 20 years or so behind where we are now. So they're really at the start of their journey. So in terms of adaptation, it's really, you know, our educators are coming in with a foundational knowledge of SEND. You know, SEND runs through the qualifications, SEND runs through, you know, we have to have a SEND policy. Ofsted are picking up on SEND support, and we've got the statutory framework, we've got the standards, we've got, you know, the SEND code of practice. There are some countries that have nothing. There is no legislation around SEN. What we also have to bear in mind is the cultural differences as well. And certainly, you know, well, way more than 20 years ago when I was at school, you know, people kind of say, don't they, you know, well, where are all these children coming from? They were never there in my day in school. Why have we now got more autistic or more ADHD students? Our children have always been there. Yeah. But when I was at school, the dyslexic child was the one that, oh, they just can't read and write. You know, they were, you know, kind of belittled because they couldn't read and write. We now know it's dyslexia, so we're providing the supports for those children. The countries that I've been working in, they're not there yet. They're still how it was when I was back at school. So it's that real kind of first level understanding of, this is what you're seeing is potentially because of this. And you see the light bulbs kind of going on and kind of going, that makes sense. The challenge is that there isn't the legislation and the directive to be able to put things in place as much as it is here. So as much as we can kind of say, the SEND system is crumbled, it's not working, it's working a hell of a lot more than what it is in some spaces. But what I have to say though, is that wherever I go, whoever I'm talking to, and I talk to educators here that are coming from, you know, from different experiences, different cultural experiences, different countries, the passion and the will and the desire to do right by our children is still there. That is across the world. You know, our children, our educators know that they need to do something, they need to do more, they need to offer more. It's that some people just don't know what that looks like yet. But the desire and the will and the passion and the understanding to go, do you know what, I don't think we're doing as much as we can, I just don't know what I need to do or what I can do. And that's the bit I'm going into in terms of it's that first level understanding of why is that child behaving that way? Could it be because there's too much colour and too much noise going, and from that kind of basic level, whereas here we're now we've got that, we understand that in terms of environments, we're now kind of pushing further. So yeah, it's just kind of going back to basics, and as always with anybody that I speak to in any setting I'm in, it's understanding that child in front of you.
Yeah.
Knowing that child in front of you, no matter what their sensory profile, no matter what their confirmed identity might be, let's work with that child right in front of us, and that's international. Let's understand Fred or Johnny or Chloe or Emily. Let's understand that child right in front of us, and let's find out and dig deep. Why are they doing what they're doing? Where does that come from, do we think? What's happened before to help us understand why that's happening now? So yeah, we're coming in just a few years behind.
But reassuringly, there's that willingness and that desire and that recognition to want to improve the quality of our children's lives.
Absolutely.
So in your training, you place a really strong emphasis on it's okay to be you. How do you encourage early years practitioners to apply this philosophy to both themselves and the children they work with, especially in challenging environments?
Yeah. Understanding that our children can be them is knowing where the behaviours are coming from, knowing where the stims, those repetitive movements, those happy stims, those happy hums, and allowing those behaviours, and it's okay. Allowing the child to play their way, not through our approach or through our questioning or through our kind of moving away of objects or resources, telling our children that they need to play a different way. The way our children play is beautiful and is okay. The way our children behave, yes, if they are hurting themselves, other children or property, that behaviour needs to stop. But if our children are bouncing around and you're thinking, well, hang on, I need to get them to stop that to come sit down on the carpet because it's story time, get them to bounce around while you're reading the story. Know that that's okay. That's their way of regulation. That's their way of supporting those really big feelings and those really big emotions. Allowing our children to communicate in their preferred communication style. As I just said in my workshop, the end goal is not verbal communication. The end goal is communication and enabling our children to have their preferred way of communicating, to have their needs, their desires and their wants met, whatever that looks like. Understanding that our children's social skills look very different. Our children's engagement and connection looks different. But that's not wrong. Our children not giving eye contact, targets that I see, child has to give, eye contact 3 times a day for 30 seconds. No, they don't actually. And it's always, I talk about the children a lot because obviously I'm early years, that's what it is, but we can't talk about the children in our early years spaces without having an acknowledgement of our neurodivergent staff.
Yeah.
So the accommodations and the adaptions that we put in place, the understanding, the celebration of our children that do life differently, we need to understand that in our adults too. Our staff that might need some regular breaks, not just the half an hour lunch that they're given in their 10-hour day, because that's too overwhelming in one space. Our staff that might just need those check-ins, those bit more regular check-ins with a senior member of staff. You doing all right? No, actually I'm really triggered today. Okay, I'll come and cover you for 10 minutes. Go and do what you need to do. And staff feeling safe that it's okay to ask for that and to have their needs met. Because only when our educators are safe and are thriving and are regulated, can they provide and be that co-regulator for the children that we need them to be. So everything that I talk about, we need to place that back on the team as well, because that will support your retention, that will support your staff well-being and just the general culture within your setting. And if that is buzzing and safe and confident and happy, then your children are going to be confident, safe, healthy and happy. And then your families are also going to be, and then that's then going to get out to the world and the local community that this is the place to be, because this is an environment where everybody feels safe. You know, I've got some a poster and bits and pieces that say, do you know what, this is a safe space. Go and be you. Go be amazing. Because we validate, recognise and celebrate exactly who you are.
Neurodiversity is becoming more recognised in education. I think it's safe to say now.
Yeah.
How do you think early years settings can lead the way in creating more inclusive environments, and what role does leadership play in this shift?
Neurodiversity is becoming more of a term, more of a using. It's still a term that is misunderstood sometimes. So we need to make sure we get the terminology right in terms of neurodiversity, neurodivergent, neurotypical, and kind of make sure that we're kind of got all of that in place. But for me, early years is the place to be. Our early years settings are, quite frankly, the best places for our neurodivergent children. I might be reprimanded for saying it, but it's when they get to school that we see the challenges. In our early years spaces, we have the flexibility. We are child-led. We follow the interests of our children. We provide free flow spaces. We allow for movement. We allow for our children to lead the way in their education and in their journey. It's the schools that, and I get it, I've spoken to teachers because, you know, they're telling me that it's really hard because they can't consolidate learning, because they have to move on to the next thing, because there's so much that they've got to get into a year. They've got 30 children in a class, one teacher, possibly a TA for the morning if you're lucky, and it's really tricky to be able to meet the individual needs of all of our children. So for me, early years is leading the way, and early years is where it's at, and early years need to get more confident in their neurodiversity affirming approaches, need to push back sometimes with some of the things that are being asked of us to do in terms of interventions and things that are there to potentially cure or fix our children and make them more compliant. But we need to ensure that our schools are ready for our children and that we're not making our children school ready. That's the shift we still need to make. We need to have the freedom, the flexibility, the creativity, the openness in our schools. It's year one, reception year one, year two as a definite should be more play-based, should be more open, should offer more flexibility for our children. I would even say even all the way up to year six. We're too quick to sit our children down, reducing the movement. You will listen, you will comply. And for many of our children, you know, as it does for my two, it just doesn't work for our children. So we need to keep shouting loud in early years. We are doing it right. There's things we could still do to improve and to make it better, definitely. But continuing with that child-led provision will go a long way to supporting the neurodiversity movement, definitely.
What challenges have you faced in your mission to promote neuro-affirming practices, and how do you think the sector can better support practitioners who are developing these skills?
Becoming a neurodiversity affirming educator is to have a strength-based approach. So looking at what our children can do and focusing on the positives and not the challenges that our children are facing. The difficulty is that in order for that child to get any HCP, in order for that child to get any funding, saying all of the things that they can do doesn't work. So as well as we can very much be that neurodiversity affirming educator, provide that neuro-inclusive practice, have conversations with our parents to advocate, to support the strengths, support their positive neurotype and be really positive in our discussions. But when it comes to seeking support and getting those EHCPs in place, as I was told for my son, one, he's not bad enough for an EHCP.
Not heard that one before.
And in order for us to get receipt of DLA, Disability Living Allowance, I had to write about worst day ever. So in order to get the funding, you have to talk about the deficits, you have to talk about the challenges, you have to talk about the problems, which is counterproductive when we're thinking about neurodiversity affirming practice. So that's one of the challenges. But I get it. The local authority only have a certain amount of funds, but we do have to spin this and we do have to look at this a little bit differently. The other thing as well is the targets that we're placing on our children that generally come from outsiders within early years. They come from other professionals placed on children's support plans. And we need to look at those targets and decide, and really not decide, really have a think about, are they supporting that neurodiversity affirming practice, or are they seeking to change a child and to make them more neurotypical and compliant to make us feel better? So a target around eye contact, a target around social skills, a target around making friendships. The reflection bit we all need to do is that we need to see our children from that neuroaffirming lens, and we need to view different as being okay. It's okay to be different. The world would be a very boring place if we were all the same.
Yeah.
And let's not, our children are not robots. Let's allow our children to be creative. Let's allow our children to be energized and supported for who they are. So really reflect and review what you're doing and look at our children through their perspective, their eyes, and that neurodiversity affirming lens. I know SEND, the area of SEND, it is a really, really tricky one. But I think just to end on, as I said earlier, I think, the desire and the want and the will to do right by our children just shines through and I'm working with nurseries and schools from Scotland to Cornwall and everywhere in between. And, I get people attending my talks and things, and I get people crying, I get people kind of reflecting, I get people getting cross with the system and why is it still like this? Just keep that motion of we need to do right by our children. My company is called Aperion Training. It's the Greek word for endless and boundless. If you've done some training on this, if you've heard one of my podcasts, whatever it might be, don't just stop there. Take your learning further. There is no limit to this. Keep learning. I'm learning and understanding more all the time. Keep learning, keep understanding, keep questioning, develop your knowledge, develop your skill set, develop your tools and your strategies so that you can better support our children.